Okay, perfect. I was going to put some, I don't think we're going to have to, this is going to come into play, but we don't have a big crowd, but just when there's question and answer, then you just raise your hands and I'll recognize you in turn and we won't cross talk, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. So first I'd like to make some introductions. We have with us tonight Nicole Paterson, who's from Miami-Dade County Crime Watch. We have our manager, Christian Manners. We have Brian McNoldy, who's going to be giving the presentation over there. And we have our interim chief, Luis Cabrera, who's, thank you, Ryan, who would like to come on up, and I'd like him to tell a little bit about himself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
First and foremost, I want to thank you for having me. I'm humbled to be able to serve this community. This is almost a dream come true for me. A lot of people tell me, watch what you wish for.
Yeah.
But I you know, I have a passion for public services in my heart, and this is a great opportunity for me. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I started my police career at the age of 19 with the city of Miami. I worked through the patrol division. Eventually I got promoted to sergeant. As a supervisor, I worked in the streets, all shifts, all areas. That's where basically we learned about community policing, about the community policing concept, and got to get a great understanding about diversity and working with all communities and everybody together, and the importance of building alliances with your community, which is your biggest asset. As a sergeant, I got promoted to lieutenant, which is considered a commanding officer in the police department. There I supervised basically numerous areas within the police department, both administration, both tactical operations, undercover operations, and everything else. And in December of 2009, I got promoted to deputy chief, where I served as deputy chief for about 8 years, until I retired in September 25th of 2017. I guess I won't forget that. So I took a little bit of time for me, take a little break, a whole 7 months, and then I joined my family here with you guys, and I'm hoping to give you not 100% to 100%, be loyal, be transparent, be able to address some of the issues. I look forward to working hand in hand. I understand there is no one more valuable in the community I serve. You're going to be number one. I also hope to bring structure, a different type of structure into the police department. I want to bring some new, fresh ideas, some new concepts that I've brought up to the manager. I don't know, I feel like a 19-year-old. I'm full of energy and life. I'm excited. People say, my God, after almost 31 years, but I don't know what's wrong with me. It's hard to explain, but I mean, I'm happy. So I'm going to use that energy, and hopefully I can do the things that you need me to do, and we have the quality of life you all deserve to have here, and we're all a big happy family. So I ask that you give me that opportunity. If I'm ever let you down or do something wrong, give me the chance to correct and improve. Unfortunately, I'm not perfect, but I'm sure going to try to not let that happen. So thank you.
Excuse me, Chief. So next up, we're going to have Brian McNoldy, who's our tropical weather system expert, or trivia geek on hurricanes. He's going to give us a short presentation, about 15 minutes or so about. We're very fortunate we have our resident weather scientist in the neighborhood. Yes. So thank you, Brian.
Yes.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me and offering to listen to me. So the first couple of slides, I'm going to show a few points on this phrase that I just love and have to tell at every opportunity I get, and it's very easy to remember. There's more to the story than the category.
Okay.
Repeat. There's more to the story than the category.
Okay.
Okay, so there's going to be a few points here over these next couple of slides that will kind of emphasize that point. because we all know the category thing, you hear about a category 1 hurricane, category 3, and this thing of it's only a category 1, whatever. First point is it only refers to the peak sustained wind located somewhere in the storm. If you have a mature hurricane, the eye wall, that little ring that surrounds the eye, that's where that wind will be. But that's all it is. It's a single point measurement that is not really representative of a lot. So it's kind of surprising, I guess, that the category gets so much attention. Because you have rather strong winds exist far from that location, such as in rain bands, and winds and rain bands can be really strong and unpleasant. And then storms come in different sizes and shapes, and larger storms they cover more area with their strong winds. So the category has nothing to do with how large a storm is. The other threat that comes with hurricanes is tornadoes, and almost all landfalling hurricanes will spawn tornadoes, usually in the rain bands. So you have the eye wall that I mentioned, that center part, that's usually not where they happen. It's usually in those sprawling rain bands that are hundreds of miles away from the center. And they're usually really fast moving, so you can get a warning for it maybe 5 minutes in advance, because they're moving at 40 or 50 miles an hour. So very little warning with them. I guess if there's a good thing about them, is that they're usually on the weak side. So as a tornado goes, they're not the really, really strong ones. Still not good though. The other thing that's not a huge problem for us in Biscayne Park, but could be, it's not impossible, storm surge, which is the mass of water pushed onto land by the winds. That can occur many, many hundreds of miles away from the center, and it's actually the thing that causes the most fatalities in the United States when it comes to hurricanes. The only way we would be in trouble from storm surge is if something were to come up the C8 canal, and then that's our low point, and we'd be in trouble from that point. That's not impossible. Inland flooding, just from rainfall, is the number 2 cause of fatalities in the United States from hurricanes. So we need to move beyond it's only a category 1 mentality, is the point. Winds, which is what the category system is based on, are responsible for 8% of fatalities in the U.S. from tropical cyclones. So it's a little ironic that so much attention is put on the category of the storm when the winds are responsible for 8% of deaths. So getting back to the point I made previously is, does size matter? And there's actually, you can be right no matter which way you answer. Yes, the larger a storm is, the more area is covered by the strong winds and heavy rain and storm surge and all of that. But it's not necessarily a stronger storm. So the example up top there is 2 storms of the same intensity. So they were both a category 4 storm at the time of this image. Same scale of map, same everything. So 2 upper end category 4 storms, one's about 4 times larger than the other. So if you only are paying attention to a category 4 storm, and let's say the track of these was both going to be equal, does anyone know what the one is on the right? Yeah, it says. So we probably know the track that took, pretty much west-northwest from there. But let's say Floyd also took that. It actually recurved to the north up the east coast. But let's say it also took the same track. The amount of destruction from Floyd would have been astronomically larger than it would have been from Hurricane Andrew. So the cone, this is another thing that I feel is a very useful thing to go over, because you see it all the time on the news. So it's the cone of uncertainty, and it's designed to contain the path of the storm's center, only the center, with a 2/3 probability using track errors averaged over the past 5 years. So if you just kind of take that a chunk at a time and combine it. So it changes shape each year, because you're always grabbing the last 5 years of track errors from the Hurricane Center. So if they have a couple really good years in there in terms of track forecast, the cone's going to shrink even more the next time. And I've got that in there. So it expands with time because uncertainty increases with time. So at the start of it, which is on the far right of the cone there, there's very little uncertainty because we know where it is. But in 4 days and 5 days, there's a lot more uncertainty. So the same size cone is used all season long and for all storms. So there's no dependence on the storm or the circumstance or anything like that. It's exactly the same cone that we'll see for every single storm and every forecast in 2018. However, uncertainty is actually higher in some cases than others, but the cone can't represent that. It's just not currently able to do that. There's things in the works that you could have a cone that actually is shaped to be more representative of the current conditions, but that's not what we've got now. Oops, I didn't hit that last point. So yeah, the storm is much larger than the center line of the track, and the impacts extend far away from the center. So the cone is not an impacts cone. That's really important. So that am I in the cone or am I outside the cone is really not a relevant question either. Because if you think about it, that's a 2/3 historical likelihood of the center being in there. So you still got a 1/3 probability of it going outside of there. And then that's only the center of the storm. So that's not counting all the mess outside of the center. So some climatology, which is fun. I love climatology of any sort. So when you combine climatology and hurricanes, it's a happy day. So this is each month of hurricane season, and I drew a circle 100 miles around us, and just added up all the hurricanes. So I didn't count if they were a tropical storm or a tropical depression. So this is just hurricanes that passed within 100 miles of us since 1851.
Oh, wow.
So we can kind of see the counts there. We've had one come by in June, pretty much right overhead as a Category 1 hurricane.
Wow.
2 in July, which down here no one would have even noticed, but
Wow.
they fit the 100-mile criteria. So,
Ah.
and then it picks up. The heart of hurricane season is August, September, October. That's true for the whole Atlantic, but also true for us. So only half of the season is really the active part historically. So it's also interesting to note that about half the hurricanes that affect us come from the east and half from the west. So the ones in July, August, September are mostly coming from the east, or east-ish, southeast, whatever. And then October, the big crowd there, and the one in November are coming from west-ish.
Wow.
So there's a shift throughout the season of where they come from. And the average return period for a hurricane coming within that area is every 3.1 years. Lately, we've had a lot less than that. You can probably count, 5 in the last 10 years maybe? If that. No, because they weren't even all hurricanes, so no, it's much less than that. But there were some periods in the past, the 40s and the 50s especially, that it was a pretty rough time here.
Yeah.
And the other big message is it only takes one.
Yeah.
So regardless of how active the season is or is forecast to be, any number of storms that form could affect land, or us in particular. 1992 is the perfect example of this. It was a very quiet season. There were only 7 named storms and only 4 hurricanes, which is about half of average. And it was also a late season. The first named storm only formed on August 16th, instead of, it's usually like late June, early July is our average date of our A storm. But it just so happened that the first one that year was Andrew. So that's just luck of the draw. But so you can get, if you're at the point where a hurricane makes landfall, it's a big deal for you, even in a quiet season like 1992 was. And on that topic, we've had some very, very close calls lately. Matthew and Irma both passed exactly 95 miles from us in 2016 and 2017.
Wow.
Both as Category 3 to 4 hurricanes at their closest approach. You don't get a whole lot luckier than that.
Thank God.
Irma had a much larger wind field, and we were on the front right quadrant. So if you picture a storm moving straight ahead, the front right quadrant is that 90-degree wedge to the front right. For a bunch of reasons, that's the unpleasant side to be on. And so we definitely had a much bigger impact from Irma than we did from Matthew, even though they were both the same intensity and the same distance from us.
That's interesting.
And then looking at those two again, they're wind swaths. So the tropical storm force wind swath is in orange, and that's 40 miles per hour sustained or higher. And then the hurricane force winds in red, which is a 74 mile per hour or higher sustained winds, that's the red. And we didn't experience hurricane conditions from either one of them. We got Matthew, we were questionably, some locations, nudged into a moment of tropical storm force winds.
Wow.
And Irma, we never got hurricane conditions here, but we got upper end tropical storm conditions for probably 8 hours, which we can see what that's capable of.
Oh, yeah.
Even tropical storms are very capable of destroying trees. So yeah, we can appreciate how destructive and disruptive even a tropical storm can be. So that's not even a Category 1 hurricane, and look what happened. So this is kind of getting toward the end. This actually did come into play last year because we did get a mandatory evacuation issued for Zone C. This is the zone. They're just in very crude squares. You can see that on the right side there. That's just what the county broke up into surge zones so that they can say, if a storm is coming, these are the people that need to get out first because they're at the highest risk of being submerged by a storm surge. So they'll always, depending on the track, but the Zone A people will be told to get out first, followed by B, followed by C, and D and E. And we just happen to be right at a line. There's a line on 119th Street that separates C from D. So officially, the northern 2 or 3 streets of Biscayne Park are zoned higher than C, but that's the way it is. And this is wrapping up. So every year there's a chance that we'll be impacted by a tropical storm or hurricane. Most years we don't get anything. But when it does happen, it definitely puts us all on edge. Biggest hazard for us is trees, obviously. We've seen that firsthand, and we have lots of them. We still have lots of them, even after. Trees or limbs can fall on power lines, houses, cars, and uprooted trees will bring water and gas lines with them, which now you lose water and gas, but having them ruptured is not good either.
That's true.
So this time of year is to prune. Pruning is extremely important in reducing all those risks to keep trees in good health, allow wind to blow through them, and keep limbs away from power lines. That's like the #1 thing we can all do. And if it's out of your skill set to prune trees, call someone to do it. It's really important. Yeah, but don't go climbing trees if you're not like a professional. I wouldn't. I'm not going to advocate for trimming your own trees if they're too big. This is also a great time to inventory and restock your key emergency supplies, things that you can buy. Actually, through tonight is the end of the tax-free hurricane holiday, so you can go home and quick shop. But things like water, lanterns, window protection if you have storm shutters, make sure you have what you need still and it's not rusted or coming apart or something. And the gas cans, there's things that you can just keep around all year long. And not, this isn't time to go buy food. Have a shelter and evacuation plan, even if it's a crude one of do I have someone in Atlanta that I could go stay with, or, you know, and let them know about this. If you choose to secure and leave your home, having a plan now saves you a whole lot of stress later. And the other part I didn't put in there, but is leaving time, leaving plenty of time so you're not stuck on the highways like can happen. And it always does happen. So, and if and when the time comes, plan on being off-grid and independent for 3 to 5 days. That's off-grid, like no power, no internet, no phone. Maybe we won't lose all of them, but plan on it. Have enough food and medication for you and your pets, don't forget cats and dogs. That's it. So there's some contact info if anyone would like to reach me. I am always happy to talk hurricanes with you. I have a blog that I send out when there's stuff going on, so if you want to be notified of when one of those comes out, grab a hold of me and I'll sign you up for that, but that's it. So
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
I would recommend to just subscribe to Brian's blog. He puts out regular updates on storms and other information. Yes, Doc?
I got a question.
Sure.
I understand this year they don't know if it's an El Nino or a Nina, and they won't know until October. Do you have any information on that? Maybe you want to explain what that means to the people here.
Yeah, so El Nino and La Nina refer to the ocean temperatures in the East Pacific Ocean along the equator. When those are warmer than average, it's an El Nino. When they're cooler than average, it's a La Nina. And it seems like it's a long ways away, but it actually influences the whole circulation pattern around the world, including the Atlantic, and can alter the likelihood of hurricanes forming. So when there's an El Nino, it usually squashes hurricane activity a little bit in the Atlantic. We are coming out of cool/La Nina conditions from last fall and are pretty much neutral now, and forecasts from the climate models suggest we'll be in warm to even official El Nino by hurricane season. I mean, it's ramping up, so I don't see anything that's going to stop it.
Oh, okay.
So it's just an ingredient that, you know, all other things being equal, notches the hurricane formation things down a notch. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay, sure.
Anybody else have any questions, Brian? Okay, thank you, Brian.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to segue and ask the chief to come up and segue into the police perspective of hurricane, what goes on after a hurricane. You mind? Or do you want it?
Right. Basically, I was discussing today at the office. I was very fortunate because in 2017, right before I left, I was at the chief and the mayor and someone, I don't know if the manager at that time was visiting Argentina. So I actually was overseeing the Office of Emergency Management, the Operations Center over there, and I was, you know, the chief running it with the police chief, with the fire chief. Also, under my command was the Office of Emergency Management for the police. So, you know, I was able to get all that experience with me during those critical hurricane seasons. What I was explaining to Chuck was the most important thing is, you know, pre-hurricane, during hurricane, and post-hurricane. Obviously, pre-hurricane is all the preparations. Make sure that you check with your local cities and governments to ensure that you review your hurricane preparation plans, identify what are the needs that you're going to need, what are your local shelters, the hospitals, what you're going to do if situation A presents itself, and be aware also, which is the most important thing, that emergency services will stop once winds pick up close to 35 miles an hour. Unfortunately, both the fire department and the police department are not able to respond to calls because of the hazard involved. The questions that we get is that's what you get paid for, and that's what you have to do. But unfortunately, if we can't get there and help you, you know, we have to be able to be there for the post. A lot of times, you know, the public safety officials will, you know, we will always do our best to get to you and do what we need to do because it's in our hearts. That's what we do. But, you know, for the most part, they will not dispatch calls and all that, so you have to make sure that you plan for this. You know, if you have a medical condition or anything that you should be concerned about, be cognizant that rescue may not be able to get to you or the police department if the winds do pick up. Post-hurricane, what we basically do is during the hurricane, we gather a lot of assessments in the operations center. So we'll find out, okay, the people will call, we have flooding here, we have a pole down here, we have cars that have been turned around, we have any type of situation. We begin to assess during the hurricane. We gather out the information. So once the hurricane passes, we send not only public safety people, but inspectors, public works, everybody. The world goes out there and does an assessment of the communities, the streets, and then that's when we begin to identify the both internal and external resources that we need to provide and the different services that we're going to need to have out there. So a lot of the cities will coordinate with FP&L, will coordinate with, you know, the public and private sector to make sure we get everybody up and running as quickly as possible. But the most important thing is safety. At that time, we really kick it up, you know, trees, down power lines. We make sure no looting. One of the things I did is right after the winds had calmed down, we made sure that we had a lot of police presence, so to avoid people taking advantage of the residents, of the businesses, of, you know, people who are going out there and trying to, you know, buy something, or and they're not taking advantage, especially the price gouging. You know, we put a plan in place for that. So we're going to be out here this hurricane season, and the manager was out here, and you know, we're going to have a plan in place. We're going to make sure that, you know, everybody's aware of it, and you know, it's available as needed when you come by our offices if you want to take a look at it. But for the most part, it's run out of the North Miami, sir?
North Miami.
Out of North Miami. We work out of their operations center.
Okay.
And we basically coordinate with all the municipalities that are within this region or this section. So, and hopefully we won't need that. That's about it. If there's any questions relating public safety.
David?
I'm not sure, Chief, if this is for you or Chuck or Christian, but when we had the hurricane workshop that you did a couple of weeks or a month or so ago, we talked about outreach to some of our senior citizens and what we might do. And Chuck, you had brought up the issue of maybe this was something Crime Watch could do, which is why I'm raising it. I don't know how that might work, but there is a list, I guess, of people who want to register or have registered. I don't know.
There is a list. Chuck keeps the list for that.
And I work with the police to go out.
And we don't bring that list into the village because we want to keep, these are our fragile residents, so we don't want that to be public record necessarily. So Chuck has been kind enough to create and maintain that list. He owns that. Prior to an emergency, a storm or something, he would share that with us so that our whole police force can know where the vulnerable people are and who we need to reach out to help.
Yeah, just to address that, I've already spoken to one of the officers, which I need to coordinate with through the chief who did it last year, and we're planning on starting to go out now. Because last year we waited too late before the storm got here. We're not doing it now. We're going to start now. I've already spoken to the chief about this when I first met him, and so we're working on this. And the only thing that would be helpful is if anybody knows someone who might be someone that should be on this list, maybe if you want to send me an email, and I could go out and see if they want to be added to the list to be checked on, because the police will check on them, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, before and then after the storm.
Yeah, we call those well-being checks. So we do check on the well-being, and we'll go there, and we'll talk to the resident and say, you know, obviously we know that this is happening. What can we do to assist you? What services are you going to need during or after? And at that time, we may see a situation where we may recommend, listen, I think that you may need to consider identifying a shelter, or consider identifying a family member or friend where you may need to relocate. So those are evaluations and assessments we do, you know, right before the storm. But you'll tell everybody, I'm sure you've told them, it's preparing before a hurricane is critical. I I mean, that's like 90%, if not more, of the whole battle, because once it happens, it happens. And then it's the post stuff, which is the unpleasant stuff, you know, where you're kind of recovering and all that. It's tough. So preparing is critical to success.
Doc, you had a question?
I just wanted to let you all know, I'm a retired OB-GYN, and I've been here since '62, so I've been through a lot of hurricanes. When I was down in Jackson, we used to bring everybody 6 months and over pregnant into the hospital. So you may know some young people that may be pregnant. Make them aware that they should talk to their doctor and let them know what he wants them to do. I've been on the board of North Shore Hospital for many years, and we bring OB patients in. So if you know of anybody that is pregnant, make sure they talk to their doctor. They always have a place over at North Shore, I guarantee you.
Chris, do you want to talk about communication, what the plan is right now, as far as?
Sure.
Thanks. And then talk about your thoughts.
Currently, I mean, right after a hurricane, every hurricane is going to be different. So right after the hurricane, we don't know exactly what we'll be facing. We certainly, can expect to lose power. Oftentimes, cell phones, landlines come down. So communication is difficult. The first thing that you as a resident can do is go to a public building, and we will have it posted where staff is. Our EOC center is Village Hall, and we're working on getting generators for that to keep that going as well. But during Irma, we were stationed here, so we were able to post on our buildings and let people know to come here for the restroom visits and to get information from us. We're also working on more communication through the Nixle system. We're looking at that and similar systems to that right now. What that is an electronic text, a push to your cell phones. You'd have to register your cell phones with us, and we will use those as well. We'll also be using email as long as that's available and possible. Of course, there's no electricity. Well, a lot of us charged our phones in our cars during the storm and after the storm, so that we can continue to get the emails and so forth. And so that's important as well. So that's what we'll be doing. We're reaching out every way we can. We certainly will be working with volunteers. Should we lose all forms of communication, landlines, cell phones, because we never know which tower is going to go down either. And so from that perspective, we'll of course have volunteers out. Last year, Chuck and David and a few other people, Dan and Rosemary, were great about helping us get the word out about where we were, what's going on, and posting daily updates. And so,
one thing I was thinking we talked about doing was I'll try to maybe organize a group of people in different areas in the village. If for some reason we have a terrible situation where we need to get distributed to the people, they can't get to the buildings, then maybe we can have area captains, but it'll be similar to block captains. So I was thinking about trying to get people to recruit people to do that. We'll see how it goes.
yeah, we've looked at a number of different options, as well as using commissioners to hit the areas around their homes, sort of divide the village up into 5 parts. And of course, the police are out as much as they can be right after a hurricane. But I mean, the first 2 days after a hurricane, realistically, what we as village staff and the police are doing are checking on people, evaluating damage, trying to find where we've got power lines down in roads and so forth that might injure someone, and that sort of thing. And then we're working to get, as staff, we're working with our debris removal company to get the roads pushed so that we can get emergency vehicles in and through as needed, and the police have a clear path and residents can come and go. And so that's usually the first 5 days after a hurricane. It was after Irma. And so, within 5 days we had pretty much all the roads cleared except for one, and there was a power line tangled with a tree, so we had to coordinate that with FP&L and the debris removal company. So from that perspective, it's just, the first week is really, it's really just depends on what we're facing. So we do ask that the residents, plan to, I know Brian's presentation said plan for 3 to 5 days. Really plan for 7 days. And if you could, a little bit, give yourself some breathing room there. We are certainly here to help. Last year, the county, our Commissioner Sally Heyman brought in bottled water for us, that sort of thing. In prior years, she's also provided ice. This last year, she didn't. So everyone was looking for ice, and none of us had it. And so we were calling the ice companies, to the west of us, and they had no power and no ice either. So that was a challenge. But anyway, so yes, the plan to be as self-sufficient as possible the first 7 days. And of course, we're here to help any way we can.
Oh, please.
And don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Does any, Fox, go ahead.
Just, I know you mentioned it when we did the stormwater workshop at the log cabin a couple of weeks back, but there was confusion about water, which we get from North Miami, boil water, don't boil water, so if you could repeat your message on that.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things is North Miami, when they send out their boil water order, obviously boil water when they send it out. They retracted it last year. They called off. It's fine. But as we were removing trees, we also had tree roots pulling up water lines. So there was information that we had here, and that was why I was like, no, continue to boil water, even though North Miami was saying not to, because we knew what was going on here, and that there were breaks in the lines, and the water wasn't clear. It was probably, I was here drinking it and bathing in it and all, just like all the other residents that stayed. But by the same token, we want to err on the side of caution. Typically, you have water lines and sewer lines that are close, so if there's a break, there's a real dam or a real risk of contamination. We don't have the sewer lines here, so that's not so much. It's usually just mud and dirt and silt and stuff like that gets into the water lines. That's why when we have a water main break now, you'll have, have to run your water for a little while to clear it out so that it runs clear again. But we are going to err on the side of caution with that. So if you hear the village putting out, or saying please boil water, and you hear North Miami saying no, we should be all clear, please go ahead and boil it.
Milton, any question?
Christian, while you're up and back to FPL a second, I know after the storm we had spoke about a conversation I'd had with them about when we can look to harden the power to the rest of the village, since they came in several years ago and did their main feeder lines, and they have designed the plan for the rest of the village. It's just not implemented. They said, of course, I had no ability to push them forward with it, and so I'd ask if you could try to do that to harden the police and admin building. Has there been any progress made on that?
We have discussed that with them. We're looking right now to put in a generator.
Right.
So that, because even if they harden that, most of the lines into the village, after a hurricane, there's main lines that are feeder lines that bring power into greater areas. And then after that, they go to smaller lines and, secondary and tertiary lines. And by the time they get here to us in the village, we have, some feeder lines, but we have a lot of tertiary lines. And so from that perspective, those are always going to be probably some of the last to be fixed. We can call FPL and scream at them, and rest assured we did. But we also want everyone to be prepared. Have your own generator if at all possible. And we are looking to fit Village Hall with a generator as soon as possible as well.
All right, thanks.
But we'll continue to try and harden too. So.
Anybody else have any? When we were talking, one of the things I thought was just to be safe, just assume right after the storm there's a boil water order in effect, and that's the safest way to proceed. I was reading that if there's the pressure's low, that's a sign that it could be a problem too. So, is anything else, Chief, you want to add? Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that we usually do in Crime Watch meetings is we have a question and answer period. But I think because the chief's been here less than a week, I think that what I would like to do is give him some time to get acclimated to the village and have another meeting, and try to have meetings more often, maybe every 2 or 3 months. So we could shoot for a meeting, say in September, right after, maybe right after school starts, or right before school starts, maybe the end of August, possibly. So that's a thought. But is there any, I didn't really have anything else. I think we've covered everything that I wanted. Oh, yes, there was a couple of things. Does some, Chief, do you want to talk about 911 and, or Nicole maybe? Do you want to talk about when to call 911? Or, people get confused about dialing 911, when the 911, do you want to come up and talk about it?
Sure.
No, this, thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I know many of you have seen me here before. My name is Nicole Paterson. I'm the Crime Prevention Coordinator from Citizens Crime Watch of Miami-Dade County. Yes, a lot of people do get confused as it relates to when to call 911. Guys, don't worry about it. It's 2018. We pay people to make that decision for you. If you have a concern, call anyways. And everything goes based on priority. So of course, if it's life or death versus your noise complaint, you're going to be switched to non-emergency. It just really depends on what's going on in your area. And sometimes certain things may be an issue or seem like an emergency or may seem very urgent to you, and we understand. But again, if there may be some kind of life or death situation or just a home break-in and they're trying to get into it before they lose the guy, be very patient that the response time might not be where you want it to be. Because guess what? If we turn our heads towards the guy who might be breaking into your neighbor's house, next week it could be your house. So everything that we do, as you guys know, when it relates to Crime Watch or crime prevention meetings, is about preventing the crime, making sure we can stop it from happening to someone else and prepare you guys when it comes to that. And even when it comes to when the hurricane season's in and all these kids are out of school, the summer season's in, all the kids are out of school, there's a lot of times, believe it or not, I know they seem innocent, they may remind you of their grandchild, they seem innocent, but still be vigilant. Because a lot of times we have people in Hialeah who sell the highlighter yellow and orange work vests, and people will come knock on your door and say, oh, they're from FPL, or they're from Comcast, and they're here to fix certain things. And think about it. If someone's coming from Comcast or AT&T, one, they have a van, they have a badge, and two, if you have no power, what are you going to fix? How do you know if it's working? But sometimes, you know, we're in the moment, and a part of us is panicking. So we don't really think it through. We're just like, yeah, that is something I need right now. We're like, wait, I don't have electricity to use any of this. So just make sure you guys stay vigilant. Always call the police, no matter if you think it's small, if you see a suspicious person, please still call. Guess what? If the person belongs here, or maybe this person's a new person that may have moved in and you're not aware of it, don't worry about it. They're going to still come and just make sure. They're going to check on it. If the person belongs here, they're going to let them go home. They're going to leave them on their merry way. So just don't worry about it. Don't worry about tying up lines. Don't worry about that, because that's some of the concerns that we do get. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to bother them. And I'm like, they're the police, bother them. Call. Only because a lot of times what you guys need to understand is when you guys don't call, we have something that we usually use in county like grid runs, and it gives us like a list of all the crimes that's happening. So if you don't call at all and that grid run comes out blank, how do we know how to properly distribute our resources within an area? So I need you guys to kind of think about it like that. The more calls you make in one area, that will kind of let them know, well, we need to show our presence here, or we need to show our presence there. If you don't call at all for that suspicious person, guess what? They might be somewhere else because that's where the calls are coming from, when they really need to probably be on the opposite side. So just make sure you guys are staying vigilant. Be mindful when the storm comes. Again, there is a lot of people. I've had this happen in one of my other villages, in the village of Palmetto Bay. During the hurricane time, we had a lot of young guys coming and knocking, especially on elderly women doors, you know, just trying to commit these crimes. And mainly, a lot of people think it's for materialistic things. A lot of times it's not. Sometimes they're looking for paperwork, honestly. Social Securities, your birthday, all those things is important to them. That is a whole larger profit to them. I mean, I could take a few hundred, but I might run out of that 100. I could file your income tax and have a few grand. Wow. So really get your minds thinking in the mind of a criminal. Don't ever say, I'm just gonna come right back, I'm gonna leave my door unlocked because I'm walking my dog. Don't do that. Just keep your eyes and ears open and make sure you're reporting everything you possibly can, okay?
Let me just add something. It's important that when you do call, you have patience with the dispatchers. They're gonna ask you information. So you were describing earlier that it may not seem important, but as you're talking to the dispatcher and they're asking you specific questions, the call may go from a priority 5 to a priority 3, because now they realize that the call needs faster response time. Also, at the moment, nothing may be happening, but then it begins to escalate, and these questions are gonna be important. Also, when we were discussing about, don't worry about calling police, it may not be important. Well, to us, everything's kind of important, because the manager may call for one thing, and something else is happening here, and something else is happening over there, and it's all linked together.
Yeah.
Yesterday, we had I had actually two incidents. One, I was driving around and I saw a garage open and a bike laying around. I'm like, oh. So I stopped, I took a look at it. It turned out to be one of those, the line bikes. But I didn't care. You know why? My priority was to make sure there wasn't a crime occurring.
Yes.
I knocked on the resident's door to make sure they were safe.
Yeah.
I reminded them that the garage door was open, and I canvassed the block to make sure that there wasn't someone. And then I called the bike company and said, I found out I've been out here for coming to get me. So I called the bike company to find out that, I found out it had been sitting out there for 3 days. I said, can you please pick up your bike?
Yes, yes.
The other